Hello, this is Mrs. Nelson. I'm here to guide you through the program called Hands-on Equations. By the end of all of these lessons in Level 1, you will be able to successfully and quickly solve algebraic equations using variables and unknowns. We're going to start out at a very concrete level so that you understand the basics of algebra and what it is that you are physically doing when you're solving algebra problems. Before you start lesson 1 today, I want you to make sure that you have taken the pretest that I provided you on the Shutterfly account. Please double check on there where you see all the worksheets. The very first thing listed should say pretest. I want you to take this to see where your starting point is. How are you solving algebra problems, and how far can you go in these 6 questions? There's only 6 questions here. If you can't answer all 6, that's absolutely fine. This is not a graded test or anything. This is for you to know as a starting point. I don't want you to take any longer than 15 minutes on this. If you take any more than that, that means the problems are too hard for you. They shouldn't take any longer than 15 minutes to solve. If you don't know what one part of the test is asking you to do, don't worry about it. If you don't know what the check means, don't worry about that. You're going to learn what that means. That's part of doing hands-on equations. Also, if you are doing this to place out of lessons in my classroom, please make sure that you're keeping samples of all your work, worksheets, or anything else in a folder or some kind of portfolio, because that will need to be presented to me to show me that you went through everything and did it. All of these lessons can be completed at your own pace. If you need to do 1 a day, or if you feel like you could do 2 a day, or whatever, it is completely independent. When you have questions about something that you don't understand, it's absolutely okay for you to come into school and ask me the questions. This is not something that you have to learn how to do completely on your own. This is giving you an opportunity to do some of the groundwork or the legwork independently, but when you run into a roadblock or you need some extra help, you need to make sure that you ask me and advocate for yourself in your learning. So make sure that you do that. Okay, so let's get started on lesson 1. This is for students that have already completed the pretest, and you should have already checked out with me a bag of materials and a laminated yellow scale. If you haven't done that, you're going to have trouble solving these problems because you don't have those materials. You may or may not need these materials for the entire length of the level 1 lessons, but I recommend that you keep them so that you can refer to them to do any checking that you need to do, or sometimes it's just helpful to go back to that very concrete and hands-on level when you get to some really challenging algebra problems. So here we go. For today's lesson, you can see that you only need your blue pawns out of your bag and the red number cubes, and of course your laminated scale. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to use and understand what it means when you use a symbol to represent an unknown in an equation. You will be able to demonstrate an understanding the concepts of equivalence, variable, constant, equation, equal to, and not equal to. And you will be able to use substitution or mental math when solving algebraic equations and looking at them in the physical form or a picture. I'm going to be solving all of mine using a picture on the computer screen. You're going to be solving all of your algebra equations by watching the picture on the screen or solving them yourself physically with the materials that you have in front of you. Okay. Here is what I'm going to be using. I have my blue pawns, my red number cubes, and then up here is my scale. I have my left side and my right side. One thing that you need to know about hands-on equations is that the left side of the scale must always be equal to the right side of the scale. So if I have one blue pawn on the left and a 5 on the right, I can use substitution. This is a pretty basic equation. I can use substitution to say, well, I know that this unknown has to equal 5, because if both sides of my balance must be equal, and this is 5, then this side must also be 5. And I only have one unknown over here. In algebra, we often give unknowns a symbol. In hands-on equations, they use the symbol x. But sometimes, depending on what textbook you're working from or what teacher is teaching the class, they might use a different symbol. It doesn't really matter what they use. It could be a y, it could be an a, it could be a b, it doesn't matter. It's still a symbol that represents an unknown value. This is an unknown value. Our symbol is x. We know by looking at this that x equals 5. Pretty basic. And we can check that by substituting x 4 in our pictorial representation of the equation here. So we would substitute 5 in for our unknown x. And so we would say that yes, then 5. And look at our left side. This equals 5. And everybody, does 5 equal 5? Absolutely does. Okay? So this is our check. Yes, 5 does equal 5. Okay? So we'll erase that. And I'll build a different equation on my scale. Now I can use some mental math to try and figure out what each of these unknowns equal. And they're both x. Both of these have to be x. One can't be 2 and one is 6. Since they're both blue pawns, that means they both have to be the same value. They can't be different values. So I could ask myself, well, then does x equal 8? Because in the last equation, we had this was equal to 5, and this side was equal to 5. So does x equal 8? And when I check that, let's substitute 8 in for our unknowns. Well, 8 plus 8 is 16. And this side equals 8. Does 16 equal 8? No, it absolutely does not. So we know that x is not 8 in this equation. So we can start thinking about other values to substitute in for our unknowns. Well, could x be 1? 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 does not equal 8. Okay, well, if 1 doesn't work, let's try 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. Does 4 equal 8? No. 3 plus 3 is 6. Does 6 equal 8? No. 4 plus 4 is 8. Does 8 equal 8? Absolutely does. So we would write x equals 4. And when we substitute 4 in for our two unknowns on the left-hand side of our balance, we get 8. And 8 does equal 8. So that equation is now true, because x equals 4 and 8 equals 8. We checked it. Okay, let's try a harder one. Now we have unknowns on both sides of our balance. Whatever the unknowns are on this side of the balance, it must also be the same on this side of the balance, because they are all x's. They're all the same value. So this x cannot be 3 and these x's be 7. That's not going to work. Okay? So we can try some mental math strategies to see what our unknown could be. So let's start plugging in numbers. I want you to pause the video, and I want you to see if you can solve for x, the unknown. Okay, so by now you should have already solved it. You were using some mental math strategy. So if you plugged in 1 for your unknown, 1 plus 1 plus 2 would be 4, and 1 plus 8 is 9, so you know 1 doesn't work. And if you tried other numbers, you know they don't work. But finally, when you tried 6, when you substitute 6 for these unknowns, 6 plus 6 plus 2, that's 12 and 14. Does it equal 6 plus 8? Yes, it does. So that is true. That is a way to make the equation true. So today, to go back to what you've learned, you learned that a symbol, x, you learned that it represents an unknown in an equation. Okay? You learned what equivalence means or equal means. We didn't really get into variables too much today because that's really something we're going to get into in level 2, but you might be able to guess what you think variable might be. We talked about how the pawns or the unknowns must be constant throughout the entire equation. You guys know what an equation is. You know what it means for something to be equal to, and you know what it means for something to not equal to. You know what it means to substitute a value in for an unknown, and then how to check that, and to use mental math to solve these problems. So we've been able to do all of these. What I want you to do now is you need to go back to the Shutterfly account, and you're going to look for the level 1 worksheet, and there are 10 problems that you are going to solve. You may use the materials that you have in front of you. There's also the picture form is on the page. You need to make sure that you answer what the unknown's value is, or the x's value is, and you also need to make sure that you are completing the check column. Good luck!